Lawrence was a messy guy. Nobody called him Lawrence, though. They just called him Larry. And like I said, Larry was a messy guy. He didn't have much use for combs or brushes. He figured that wherever his hair ended up that day was where it wanted to be. Larry didn't see that it made much sense to spend all day convincing his hair to do something it was dead set against doing. So Larry mostly went around looking like he'd just woken up. Not that he'd ever looked in a mirror to see the chaos atop his head. Not that he'd care that much even if he did. Everything that belonged to him was worn out, scribbled on, shabby, or broken. His desk at school could easily qualify as being a minor health hazard. Inside the desk were bits and pieces of stale pretzels, crumpled up spelling tests, broken crayons, half-squished black jelly beans, a few moldy orange peels, half the peanut butter and jelly sandwich from 2 weeks ago, and enough recyclable paper to make an environmentalist drool. Ms. Marks was always telling Larry that having a clean and orderly desk saves time, because you can find your belongings faster. Larry, however, didn't really see the point in saving time at school. The way he saw it, the only thing he could do with more time at school would be more schoolwork. At home, it was the same, except that his mother didn't let him get away with leaving things very messy for very long. Larry didn't really see what the fuss was about, especially things like making his bed. If everyone is so concerned about saving time, what's the point of making a bed in the morning when he was just going to mess it up again that very same evening? Larry's mother said that saving time had nothing to do with it. She said that if people saw his unmade bed, they would think that he was a slob. Well, Larry was a slob, and didn't see any reason to pretend to be anything different. Then do it for me, his mother would say. Which, of course, Larry did. In kindergarten, nobody seemed to mind Larry's messiness. In fact, some kids might have even been messier than Larry was. But as Larry got a little older, he found more and more ways to be sloppy. Now, nobody disliked Larry. Nobody teased him all that much. Then again, nobody hung out with him all that much either. His classmates just didn't see Larry as someone to go out of their way to be friends with. You might think that Larry would be sad or even angry about not having friends, but he wasn't. Because Larry didn't really know what he was missing, so he pretty much kept to himself. As long as nobody hassled him too much, everything was all right with Larry. All this changed when Ms. Marks introduced a new student standing at the front of the class. Her name was unlike any Larry had ever heard. Gertrude Ergstreimer. Gertrude Ergstreimer. It sounded to Larry like the song of frogs aspiring to poetry on balmy summer nights. Larry liked poetry. And frogs. Ms. Marks said that instead of Gertrude, most people called her Gertie. Still, Larry could hear the frogs. Gertrude Ergstreimer. Gertrude Ergstreimer. The first thing that Larry noticed about Gertie was that although her hair wasn't quite as messy as his usually was, it was uncombed, unruly, and free. Her clothes were faded hand-me-downs, personalized with faint grass stains. Larry liked whirling in the grass. And stains. In fact, there was an impressive bright pink stain on her dress from this morning's breakfast. Strawberry Quick, Larry's favorite breakfast drink. What really interested Larry was that, unlike every other girl in the class, she had dirty fingernails, just like he did. She didn't look like the kind of girl who was afraid to play in the mud after it rained. As Gertie went to sit at her new desk, Larry thought that maybe this was somebody he might like to get to know, them having similar ideas about personal hygiene and all. At lunch, as Larry was scooping with his pinky the last bit of chocolate pudding from its plastic cup, he found himself staring at Gertie's mouth. She had a spectacular milk mustache that extended well beyond the corners of her mouth. 5 minutes had passed, and she still hadn't wiped it off. Larry wondered what it would look like when it dried. He'd kind of like to see that. Suddenly, his thoughts were interrupted by a voice from the boys' side of the table. "Huh, I didn't think a girl could be dirtier than a boy. What's your name again?" "Dirty Gertie," somebody chirped before she could answer. Some kids laughed, but one girl quickly stood up and with her hands on her hips said, "When they want to, girls can do anything better than boys. You guys are only better at the things we don't care about." For a second, the boys were stunned. But just for a second. Then there was a very loud and mixed-up chorus of boys shouting, no way, and what are you talking about?" This was answered on the girls' side by an even louder chorus of, "Yeah-huh, yes way, and wanna bet, wanna bet?" So there was a challenge. The boys accepted. One of them said, "Larry is way dirtier than Gertie. She's just plain old dirty Gertie. Our man Larry, he's Larry Unsanitary." "Aw, that's nothing," said another girl. "She's only dirty Gertie on her clean days. Most of the time she's known as crude, rude, eat maggot food Gertrude." Again, for a second, the boys were silenced. Then one of them ventured a comeback. "Oh yeah? Well, Larry, he's so dirty that, he's like, gross and stuff, and, seeing that his comrade brother was in trouble, another boy butt in. "You know, Super Larry here, his real name is just a glance makes rats and ants puke in their pants, Lawrence." Everybody thought this was hilarious. A word like puke always gets a laugh for some reason. The one that laughed the loudest was Larry himself. He looked over at Gertie. She was a little quiet, but she had a slight smile under that magnificent dried milk mustache of hers. Apparently, neither of them had gotten this much attention in a long time. Anyway, not to be outdone, one of the girls spoke up. "Gertie doesn't eat worms 'cause they don't have enough germs." Surprising even himself. One of the boys fired right back, "Well, Larry eats the germs and the worms if they're very hairy." Well, nobody had a reply to that kind of wit. But instead of fumbling around or saying something uninspired and awkward like the boys would have done, the girls smoothly issued another challenge, a contest. The girls dared the boys to have a competition to prove who was better at being scummy, grimy, grubby, gross, sick, and disgusting, girls or boys. Again, the boys accepted. After a bit of haggling over the specifics, it was decided that they would meet at the baseball bleachers 15 minutes before school started the next day. Larry and Gertie would be the representatives for each side. If Larry was dirtier, the boys would be able to claim victory forever. If Gertie was dirtier, the girls would be the champions, and the boys would have to acknowledge the superiority of woman in all things for all time. The stakes got even higher when one of the boys, caught up in the excitement of the moment, suggested a punishment for the losing side. Immediately after the decision, every member of the losing side would have to get kissed by the winning side's representative, right in front of everybody, maybe even on the lips. The girls quickly agreed to this idea because, well, to back down was unthinkable. Besides, the girls knew that if they worked together, they could make Gertie look impossibly filthy and fabulous. Winning was inevitable. So it was settled. The awful dirty Icky kiss contest was on. The boys walked away from the negotiations with a cheeky swagger, but once out of sight from the girls, their bravado quickly disappeared. The boy who had thought of the kiss punishment suddenly had a crisis of confidence. He hadn't thought through what would happen to him if he were to be on the losing side. He turned to Larry and pleaded, "Don't let us down, Larry. Please, I don't want no sticky kiss from that new girl. Not on the lips." The boys murmured their agreement. Another boy spoke up. "Hey, Larry, you want some help getting real grimy tomorrow? Me and Steve could come over and help you out a little." Larry paused and thought about it. "Thanks, guys," he said, "but I think I can handle it on my own." You see, Larry already had a few ideas, and there needed to be an element of surprise to make them work. But it was nice of them to offer. Larry went home and planned what he was going to do. He had to act completely normal so that his mom would not find out what he was up to. That night he could hardly sleep. He had already thought about using the motor oil in the garage. That was the obvious choice. But oatmeal? Oatmeal had real possibilities. And ketchup, with streaks of mustard, peanut butter, and honey, too. It was all coming together. Bananas had not yet occurred to him. That came later. As he lay there trying to fall asleep, a little song came to him. He quietly sang it to himself a few times to make sure that he would remember it, and eventually dozed off. He dreamed restless dreams of mud and glory. In the morning, he dressed in his normal clothes and ate breakfast. He talked with his mom for a while before she left for work. She never suspected a thing. Larry quickly changed into some old torn-up clothes. He figured that he might as well start out with the mustard and the ketchup. He smeared ketchup on his pants and made long mustard stripes on them. Then he smeared extra chunky peanut butter and extra sticky honey up and down his arms until they were all shiny and brown. Larry couldn't believe he was actually doing this. The smile muscles on his face were starting to get tired. He went out to the garage and gooped dirty old motor oil all through his hair. He went back into the kitchen and added dry oatmeal to the mixture. He checked in the mirror. It looked gloriously hideous, but it needed something more. What could it be? He looked around. Ah, yes, the final touch would be a pair of really old, really black, really gushy bananas. Larry brought them back to the mirror, quickly peeled them, squished them in his hands for a while because he kind of liked the way it felt, and then proceeded to slime his face. And there he was, a masterpiece of monstrosity. On his way to school, he thought of rolling in one of the mud puddles on the side of the road, but thought that the mud would ruin all the artful work he had done with the ketchup and the mustard. He was starting to get nervous about what would happen if he won and had to kiss all the girls in the class. Even so, he still couldn't stop smiling. At the school's entrance, 2 boys were waiting for Larry. "Whoa, cool. Larry looks like the lizard zombie from the Black Lagoon," one said. The other laughed. "It's a good thing you're being judged on how you look, Larry, 'cause you smell like my lunch. Except, is that motor oil?" They had a big old blanket to cover him from the girls until just the right moment. Proudly, they escorted their representative to the bleachers by the baseball field. The whole class was sitting on the bleachers, waiting eagerly. Excitement was in the air. Finally, one of the girls got up and shouted, "Ladies and gentle jerks, the contest is about to begin. It's boys against girls. Who is the dirtiest, Gertie or Larry? Remember, all the members of the losing side will receive the wettest, slimiest, most disgusting kiss of their lives." Both sides began to tease each other, making kissing noises. Some kids laughed nervously. Others were shaking their heads in fear, murmuring, "No, gross." Then the girl continued, gesturing with her arms. "Get ready, ladies and soon-to-be losers. Here she comes, representing all of womankind, our very own Gertrude Ergstreimer." The girls all screamed. Out came Gertie. Earlier that morning, 3 girls had helped her get ready. They had gotten her face wet and covered it with white flour. Then they smeared bright red shiny lipstick all around her mouth, making her look something like a clown who had gone to bed without taking off her makeup. Her clothes had been carefully decorated with powdered Kool-Aid and chocolate syrup. But it was her hair that stood out. Literally, it was sticking out in every direction. The girls had worked through her hair the gloopiest, chunkiest, most foul-smelling can of dog food they could find. Think of the worst odor you can imagine. This was worse. As you'd expect, the girls cheered like crazy for Gertie. But what you wouldn't expect was that even some of the boys clapped their hands in admiration. She was really something. Gertie looked up shyly at the crowd and smiled a big, toothy grin. Then, with perfect timing, through her 2 front teeth, she expelled blackberry jam, which welled up under the corner of her lower lip, and then the jam oozed out of the corner of her mouth, slid down her chin, and plopped down glop by glop to the ground. Some of the class turned their heads squealing, "Ew," but most just laughed. Gertie smiled again, licked her blackened lips, and gracefully curtsied to great applause. She skipped lightly to the bleachers to sit with her new friends. They hugged and high-fived, and could not stop laughing for a long, long time. Though Larry wasn't sure he could match Gertie's performance, he still had to try. After being introduced by one of the boys, he walked out, completely covered in the blanket. The boys hooted in approval, shouting, "Larry, Larry, unsanitary! Larry, Larry, unsanitary!" And as they cheered, he crouched down to pick up 2 great big gobs of mud in his hands. He poked his head up from under the blanket with his gushy banana face. Everybody howled with laughter. So did Larry. He sprang up and cast off the blanket, showing his oily and gritty hair and his sticky arms and his crazy red and yellow pants. The class screamed and then laughed all the more. And when the laughter subsided a little, he began to sing the song he made up and practiced the night before. As he sang, he slowly smeared the mud all over his clothes. "I'm a messy, messy guy. I won't shower till I die. People plug their noses when they pass me by. I can't raise my arm. It'll do you harm. Smells so bad it sets off smoke alarms. My hands get icky. My hair is sticky. My own breath'll be the death of me. I'm dead. Oh, I'm dead." And then he fell over, rather dramatically, and then lay still. The class went nuts. No one, not even Larry himself, knew he could be so funny. Unfortunately, the noise they were making was so loud that Principal Sherman could hear it all the way from her office. She hurried out to investigate and caught the end of Larry's song. She was furious. Although she ordered everyone to class, they went laughing. She pulled Gertie and Larry together and gave them a good talking to, shaking her finger at them to emphasize the importance of proper cleanliness and orderly conduct at school. She notified both of their mothers and sent them home to clean up. Fortunately, neither of their mothers thought that it was quite as serious a matter as Principal Sherman thought it was. Larry was somewhat disappointed that they didn't get to decide who won the contest. He sort of would have liked to have found out what kissing every girl in the class would have been like. Oh well. As it turned out, Gertie lived near Larry's house, so they walked home together. They didn't say very much to each other, but just before they arrived, they found a huge mud puddle. They stopped and decided to make a little mud village. When they finished, they made tiny stick people to put inside the village. As they placed the last few stick people in their new homes, Gertie leaned over to Larry and said, "Even though everything is made of mud, do you think that the villagers will like their new town?" Larry looked down and smiled. "Yeah, I think they will. At least, I hope so." Gertie nodded. "Well, I think we're done. Let's leave our villagers alone for a while so they can make friends. We need to clean up and get back to class. Want to see who can get back to class the cleanest?" Larry got up to go and smiled. "Okay, but I bet you'll win. I don't know if I'm ever going to be able to get this oil and oatmeal out of my hair." I'm a messy, messy guy. I won't shower till I die. People plug their noses when they pass me by. And I can't raise my arm. It'll do you harm. Smells so bad it sets off smoke alarms. My hands get icky. My hair is sticky. My own breath'll be the death of me. Oh, I'm dead. Oh, I'm dead.